941, Big 550 KTRS. Chief political anchor of Fox News and the anchor and the executive director of Special Report with Bret Baier is going to join us here in mere moments as we get him and his secured bunker. He has written a brand new book. New York Times bestselling author Bret Baier is going to join us. His new book, I can't wait to read it. I have not read it in terms of full disclosure. It's called 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's Final Mission. And from what I understand, Bret Baier, is that this book talks about the last 3 or 4 days of Dwight Eisenhower's tenure as president, his farewell address, and his helping a brand new president, JFK, and a new generation take over power, and the things he did in those final 3 days that in many ways changed the course of America. Do we have Bret Baier?
We do.
Bret Baier, thank you for joining us here in St. Louis on the Big 550 KTRS.
Hey, McGraw, good morning.
3 days in January. Is it true that the last three, it sounds like a keg party in college, but this is a story
I've
about...
had to recover from some 3 days in January.
Right. It sounds like it's a story that hasn't been told correctly about Eisenhower's last days in office.
Yeah, long story short, the reason I looked down at this topic was because I realized that I cover politics, I cover Washington, and I didn't really know that much about the Eisenhower presidency. I knew about Eisenhower overall, but I really wanted to look into that and introduce this presidency to my generation and younger, who maybe history started with Kennedy, it seemed. So when I went out to the library in Abilene, Kansas, they said one of the things that hasn't really been focused on in all the books about Eisenhower is this transition from Eisenhower to Kennedy. He delivers the farewell address, Eisenhower does, on January 17th, 1961, 3 days before Kennedy's inauguration. And so I used the soda straw of looking in that moment, and we found some amazing oral histories and nuggets and letters that had never been tapped before to do this narrative of those 3 days, and then jump back and look at Eisenhower's presidency, what he got done, and how he got there, as a general in World War II who won the war.
Isn't there a story out there that Eisenhower sort of sat Kennedy down and said, you need to worry about your generals leading you down the wrong path, and Kennedy said, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, old man, which then ultimately led to the Bay of Pigs?
Long story short, that's true. We get into the details. So the book starts with President-elect Kennedy meeting President Eisenhower at the Oval Office. By the way, it ends, the book does, with President-elect Trump meeting President Obama at the Oval Office. Mm-hmm. But it starts, and Eisenhower is skeptical of Kennedy. He's watched him on the campaign trail. He doesn't get why America has chosen this, what he thinks is a matinee idol who's hollow. And Kennedy said some things that Eisenhower didn't really like on the campaign trail. He sits down with him, and he's impressed with him. He thinks, maybe, America saw something I didn't. But Eisenhower warns Kennedy. He says, you need to have dissenting views all the time. That's why we set up this national security apparatus, this program where everybody can argue about different aspects of national security. Kennedy kind of blows him off, is a little cocky, says basically that he can handle things with a few advisors. Gets into office, and you're right, Cuba happens, the Bay of Pigs. That operation goes forward. It's a disaster. Kennedy calls it a disaster. And the first person he calls is former President Eisenhower, who he flies out to Camp David. And that's that iconic image on the front of the book. They're walking up the path at Camp David, McGraw, and Kennedy turns to Eisenhower and says, no one really knows how tough this is until you're in this job. And Eisenhower turns to Kennedy and says, Mr. President, with all due respect, I think I told you this 3 months ago.
The picture on the cover, Bret Baier, is tremendous. The book is called 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's Final Mission. Bret, why is it that history has sort of forgotten about Eisenhower when we should be studying him and talk about him much more?
it's really relevant today. One of the reasons he's forgotten is because he was kind of a humble leader, as hard as that is to believe in today's day and age with leaders and all they talk about. He empowered others and gave credit to others. I mean, that's how he was successful as a general, dealing with the egos of Patton and Bradley and MacArthur and Montgomery and de Gaulle. He really got all of those people together on a strategy to win. And D-Day, he operated the same way in the White House, and largely that's why I think he's not remembered so much. But if you look back, he got us out of the Korean War. He passed the biggest infrastructure project in the national highway bill that set up the interstate system and built the interstate system we drive on today. He passed the first civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. He put "Under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. "In God We Trust" was printed on the money because of President Eisenhower. It was a booming economy during his time, and not a single soldier was killed in combat in 8 years under President Eisenhower.
How long after he left office did he die?
1969, that's right, I think.
So it's a good 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, it was 8 years. Yep.
Yeah. A really extraordinary book, Bret Baier. I can't wait to sit down and devour it. 3 days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's final mission. Let me ask you about the news of the day, Bret Baier. What do you think of President-elect Trump's first news conference yesterday? There's 3 days in January for you to chew over.
Compressed into one. It
Right.
was fiery, and I think that is a forecast of things to come. I mean, if you look at his supporters, obviously they said, hey, this is it. This is what we want. We want somebody to be a bull in the china shop of establishment media and kind of, rake them over the coals if they get something wrong. I'll just tell you, from a chief White House correspondent that I used to be, I hope that it doesn't limit the access of getting questions asked, and I hope that there's still a lot of access in this Trump presidency. I know a lot of guys at CNN who are great journalists, and so while I don't think that what they did and how it was done was particularly the right way, I do feel like looking back at the Obama administration, Fox News was in the target at the beginning then too, and our colleagues at other networks stood up for us. So I think just on the journalist part, I hope it doesn't portend that less access.
Yeah. Bret Baier, I've always known you to be a straight-up good guy, a great newsman, and thank you for all the work you do. The book is called 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's Final Mission. Bret Baier, good luck with the book, and you're always welcome here in St. Louis.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
You got it. Bret Baier with us from Fox News. 3 Days in January. The picture on the cover of the book is phenomenal. It's the two men walking away from the camera. Eisenhower is his hands behind his back with his hat. Kennedy's sort of hunched over, like listening to every word he's saying. And there's a man who's at peace with himself after planning D-Day and everything else. 8 years of the presidency saying, I told you so. It's a pretty extraordinary picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words. 9:50.